Well,
So
let's talk about these injuries. I mean, from what I understand, Greenlaw is going to play. He's missing practice, but he is scheduled to play from what it sounds like, or at least what the word is from the building. But I do think that there's a good chance that Armstead's going to be out again. They said that it could be a 2 week thing initially. So it sounds like he'll probably be out. Maybe they're without Hargrave as well, or as Shannon Sharp calls him, Jerome Hargrove. They'll be without him potentially. And then Charvarius Ward. We know that these injuries are here, and we know that the Cardinals are not the best team, but they are 2-2 since Kyler Murray's come back. And you can be a lot better than a team, but when you have a ton of injuries, it kind of levels the playing field. So, Larry, I'll start with you. Are you concerned at all if those three don't go, Charvarius Ward, Hargrave, and Armstead, that brings the 49ers back to the pack enough to make this game at least interesting?
no, my bigger concern, Jesse, is that they get to the playoffs with a less than 100% Greenlaw or without Greenlaw.
Mm.
So like, I think they're pretty loaded at linebacker. I like Flanagan Fowles. I like Curtis Robinson. I like the two rookies. And I was trying to, kind of flesh that out with Wilkes today a little bit. Do you like Graham? Do you like Winters? Because I know Greenlaw is going to go, and he's going to try to go. But to me, there's a handful of guys that the Niners have got to have at full tilt to get this thing done on the back end in the playoffs, and that would be like Debo and obviously CMC and Trent offensively, maybe Kittle, and then on defense it's Warner and Bosa and Greenlaw. And if you have a healthy Greenlaw and a rested Greenlaw, I think the Niners are going to be hard to beat. So I would err on the side of conservative, and I would try to. I think the Niners can beat the Cardinals without Greenlaw. I'm not saying they could win with all their backups or anything, but I definitely think that they don't need. They could rest Greenlaw because they've got quality depth there, and go with other guys, and that's what I would do. I would try to hold him out. You want to not? I'd sit him this week. I'd play him next week, and then if you get that win against the Ravens, I might sit him another week. But I'd rather have him for the biggest games, Ravens, playoffs, than have him for this game.
So even without Greenlaw, Hargrave, and Armstead, you're not worried about them stopping the run if all three of them sit?
Well, I like some of the other guys. I mean, I like what I'm seeing out of Givens. I like what I'm seeing out of Kinlaw, Kalia Davis. I mean, I don't feel great about it, right? Armstead is,
of course,
but
Right.
I think they can. I think they can win this game without Armstead and without Kinlaw, or without Armstead and without Hargrave.
Okay.
Mooney is a concern, but they just signed Jason Verrett. They like what they're seeing out of Darrell Luter. We're in that part of the schedule, guys, where the Niners may have to lean on the youth. They're going to have to lean on Kalia Davis inside. They're going to have to maybe lean on young DBs. They may have to lean on a couple young linebackers. And this would be the part of the schedule where they probably should and could do that. So I'd like to see them try it. I know a lot of people are saying, "No, play your best, play your best." I don't know. I want to see them. I want to see more of a healthy contingent against the Ravens, and I want to see hopefully a full intact team come playoff time.
What about you, Coach?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree. I understand that right now we want everybody to play because we do have the number one seed. So we got to keep the main thing, essentially. We have to win out, right? I understand that we got everybody else dealing with their own druthers of the season, but for what it's worth, we can't afford to lose a game, especially a divisional game. So this one counts. Yeah, I do tend to say that this is the one where coaching is going to have to get us through. You're not going to be able to lead with your best guys because you're left with two decisions, essentially, right? You're saying to yourself, all right, we've got requisite talent that's going to be out. All right, it's going to be a clear dip in production. But at the same time, we're playing a team that is, ranked 31st off defensively and 19th offensively, respectively. So this is the time where you lean more on your coaching and you let younger guys to go ahead and get the reps that they need. Because losing a Dre Greenlaw or an Eric Armstead or somebody earlier into the season, right? I mean, well, later into the season now, before we get to the playoffs, could deem as catastrophic. So yeah, I lean with what Larry's line of thinking is that it's time for us to see what the young guys got anyway. And if you think about it, last week we saw a bit of that anyway with Eric Armstead being out. We got a healthy dose of Javon Kinlaw and Kalia Davis playing. Kalia Davis was left a bit more to be desired, but at the same time, this is what we need to do because you think about it, the bigger issue is what? We got, let's just go ahead and say for what it is. I didn't see this coming, but we have hands down the best roster in NFL right now.
Yep.
There's not a team that is better than them. So now we have to figure out how are we going to calibrate with A, paying what we have, B, figuring out who's worth the money versus their age and their talent, and C, how much development are we going to get out of the young guys that are eventually going to replace them? And what type of reps can we steal along the way at any time to get proof of concept to A1, see if they're worth pushing off of what we need, because that's what good teams do, right? We pushed off of Kwanzaa Alexander when he was a big time free agent acquisition where we leaned on Dre Greenlaw, right? Where we leaned on Fred Warner. And these are the times where we pushed off of these guys where, quite frankly, none of us knew, but the organization knew early. So that's how strong rosters stay ahead of the game is they play their young guys, they develop them, and they get them pushing forward where when the rest of the league is paying high price for a guy that we've essentially moved on from, we've got his replacement in tow. Games like these is how you get to that solution, right? So yeah, it's not going to be one of those games where we can come in with the best of the best, the tip of the spear of what we got. But to be quite honest, we shouldn't have to, right? This team is not good enough for us to worry about that. And now is the time for us to rest our starters, all right, for the latter part of the season and the postseason, and to see what we have out of our young guys. So yeah.
Yeah, I do think that there's an element of, and I talked about this early in the week, blessing in disguise, where you do get to get a sneak peek at some of these young players, get them that development, and also not only for the future, but they might need them in this year. What if a player goes out mid-game and misses half of a playoff game or has to miss a playoff game? We're starting to see that the 49ers probably have a lot more depth than what we initially thought going into the season. I know, Larry, we talked many times about concern, depth on the defensive line. Well, some of those mid-season acquisitions, they fulfilled that. And then I think we had some similar concerns about the offensive line as well as the secondary. And I think the depth in all three of those has improved as the season's gone along, which is great because now you're needing to lean on some of that depth. So I don't think long term I'm overly concerned about it. I guess what keeps creeping into my mind is at some point you can even things out with talent if enough people go out. And the Falcons game last year is what keeps popping into my mind, where it was like, okay, they went in there without 3 or 4 defensive starters. And then throughout the war of attrition in that game, they lost another 4, and it was enough for them to lose the game. Now, the big difference is the offense this year is in a much better spot. You've got Brock Purdy instead of Jimmy Garoppolo. You now have a CMC on this team. He was not there for that game. So I think offensively, if they have to get in a shootout, it should still be a very winnable game. But the more players that don't play, and we've seen Connor kind of run ruckshaw on our defense before, well, all of a sudden you start moving 3 key cogs out of the middle of that defense. I think things can get a little bit interesting. I'm not picking Arizona. I would still pick the 49ers to win and probably comfortably, but at some point things even out. So something worth looking at, I guess.
It's all, there's that old saying, Jesse, next man up. Well, it sounds great and everything, but it's really all dependent on who that next man is. So like Warren Burks is out, next man up. Well, next man up might be D Winters or Jalen Graham. I feel really good about that. I really do. I'm not concerned. But if next man up is, now not to beat up on this guy, but Josh Johnson from last year, now now it's more of a saying than anything else. But I just look around the field. I mean, Ronnie Bell may have to play a little bit. Jordan Mason down the stretch here may have to play a little bit. That's okay. I think I want to see him. Robert Beal may have to give it a go. Graham, Winters, Terrell Luter, Jair Brown, of course. Some of these draft picks, some of these rookies are going to have to step up and be willing to play. And maybe even a couple guys off the practice squad. Maybe a Taylor Hawkins might have to step into the breach and show what he's got for a game. So, I mean, I just think that it's almost inevitable over the course of, if you're really intent on playing into February and going to the Super Bowl, it's almost inevitable that you're going to have to, utilize that depth and kind of take it for a test drive. Do you want to do it in the playoffs, or do you want to do it on the way to the playoffs? And right now they're kind of on the way to the playoffs. And then the other thing, like Trent Williams made the point a couple of times to us in the last month, that there were times where he played where he feels like he shouldn't have played, and that Colton McKivitz would have been a better option against the Rams when he had I think it was an ankle that he was battling. So then it's a matter of like, do you want Hargrave at 60%, or is it better to have Givens at 100%, or Kalia Davis at 100%? You want Oren Burks at 55%, or do you want D Winters or Jalen Graham at 100%? So it's going to be on the coaching staff to get these young guys coached up and ready to roll come Sunday. And I'd lean on the youth and try to get to the playoffs with as much of my big time guys rested and ready as possible.
Yeah,
I see it as a win-win.
I do
It's
too.
just a win-win.
I do too, because you might have to use those guys anyway. You may as well use them against Arizona and find out what they got. And you know what? I suspect that Jalen Graham isn't good, but great. And I think D Winters might be better than Oren Burks. And I know Burks has played really well, so I know that's a big statement. But I don't think that there's a huge disparity between what Burks is going to give you and what like Flanagan Fowles or Winters or Graham's going to give you. I just don't. So we'll see. We'll see who's out there come Sunday.
Well, I mean, you guys have seen him. This is proof of concept because you guys have both been to training camp, right? So you guys have seen him. And from your perspective, I mean, the way I see it is nobody gets a free ride on this team. I've learned that over the years. Nobody gets, especially with this regime, right? But as you move forward, you have to say to yourself, all right, well, we looked at training camp. You guys have seen more of D Winters and Jalen Graham versus Oren Burks than all the rest of the fans have. You guys have a unique perspective. So in my mind, right, outside looking in, right, I haven't been to camp. Am I saying, tell me if I'm wrong, guys, am I looking at Oren Burks maybe got the bump over D Winters and Jalen Graham because he was more of a special teams asset and could cover more of the 53 rather than, a Jalen Graham and a D Winters who are great, well within their own skill set of being a linebacker, but they're just not pros yet. Versus the difference between being a pro and being a player is, most guys come into the league and they play a position, right? But the NFL isn't about playing a position. The NFL is about playing football. So Oren Burks makes most NFL rosters, not necessarily because he plays linebacker, but because he's a special teams mate, right? So where do you guys see the bridge between Oren Burks and Jalen Graham and D Winters? Where's the gap where you would see why they went with Oren Burks over them? Because what I'm hearing from both of you is that these guys are better, or you necessarily don't feel as though there's that much of a drop off. So why Oren Burks? Why did he get the nod?
Well, I mean, I think I think the short answer is run fits, right? Like Graham's going to make some incredible plays. He's fast, he's instinctive, but he may pick the wrong hole, and you may see somebody go for 75 yards, And as far as I asked Wilkes today specifically about Graham, because I think Graham is potentially great. I don't even think he's good. I think he's a future All-Pro or Pro Bowl. Well, not All-Pro maybe, but Pro Bowl. I think he's a Pro Bowl caliber linebacker. And he said that Winters is ahead of Graham because Winters played linebacker full time at TCU, where Graham at Purdue played kind of a hybrid. He was a safety who transitioned to linebacker. So he thinks he's a little bit behind Winters, and he doesn't pick things up quite, or he hasn't picked up the defense quite as fast as Winters. So Winters would be ahead. But I think it's, if you said Winters versus Burks, I think Burks is was a little bit more dependable early in the year. And I think it just comes down to consistency with being in the right run fit, right hole at the right time, the right spacing. But now that was July, and that was August. Now we're in December, and D's watched a ton of film. I just talked to him Wednesday, and he's ready. If he gets this opportunity, he's ready to roll. He's watched a ton of film. He's talked a lot of ball. He's worked with Johnny quite a bit. He feels a lot more confident than he did this summer as far as being able to play from scrimmage. So if Burks can't go, and it doesn't sound like Burks is going to go,
Right.
then Winters and Flanagan Fowles can step in there, and I don't think they're going to miss. I'm not saying they won't miss any. There will be no drop off, but I don't anticipate a big one.
Yeah, Graham for me. I know the quarterback thing was like the big talk of training camp, obviously, but anybody who watched my post practice shows,
Right.
I try to talk about Graham every day, and he was like my main talking point coming out of that whole training camp situation when I did my overall recap of the days that I was there. I said then, the only agenda I'm pushing here is the Jalen Graham agenda, because that kid is really, really good. He's the only one that in the one-on-one drills was consistently winning. I charted something like 55 one-on-one passing drills. And the defensive player won, I think, a total of 4 times out of those 55 reps, and he was 2 of them. So I think he does have a ton of potential. That doesn't mean he's necessarily ready now. I can see why they would go with a veteran in Oren Burks, but I think long term, I do agree with Larry. I love what Graham brings to the table. So I would like to see him out there for sure, but it sounds like he's a couple notches down the depth chart, and that's, a little unfortunate, but.
Well, that's what I mean. The only reason why I asked is because what you guys just relayed right now is how I felt throughout the preseason, throughout camp. I felt as though, Oren Burks is a guy, and he covers a lot of real estate as far as what you need to utilize out of a 53-man roster, right? But I kept hearing about Jalen Graham. I kept hearing D Winters seemed to come in early near OTAs, if I'm remembering this correctly, because I have a unique perspective, right? I wasn't at camp, so I'm literally going off of what you guys are telling me, right? I'm hanging off of every word. I just started my YouTube channel at the beginning of the season, right? So for me, it always came off as though that D Winters came on early, right? Especially in rookie OTAs and minicamp. Then as camp started progressing, then we put the pads on. D Winters is maybe his conditioning and maybe his body, he's just not really there yet, but he showed a lot of promise. But the guy who seemed to be kind of turning heads from start to end, I think Jalen Graham came on a little late, but Jalen Graham, man, I heard about all of the plays he was making. I saw him playing in a couple of preseason games, especially the Denver game. I just want to know, what's the hubbub? What is keeping him back? What would you see is holding him back? Because usually when you get guys like him, where Jalen Graham rather, is they get drafted late, they come in late, and once they pop on film right away, immediately the first thing you're asking to yourself is, all right, so where's the flaw? Where's the flaw? This kid got drafted late. He's come in, he's showing immediate production. What is it about? There must be something, right, about this kid that made everybody just take their hands off. What would you say is that flaw or that area of their game why Jalen Graham wasn't automatically just given the BA treatment, so to speak? Yo, you're on the field. We can't keep you off the field. You're here.
He played this position at Purdue that they called the star position, right?
Right.
And so he was kind of a hybrid safety linebacker role. And so I think most people, coach, thought that he needed a little bit more bulk and body mass to stand up between the tackles as an NFL linebacker consistently. But he plays faster than he timed, and he timed 4.64 in the 40, 1.68 in the 10-yard split. And he was very productive. I mean, he was all Big Ten player, honorable mention, I think, one year. But I mean, this guy makes a lot of plays, and there's no hesitation in his game, and he's very athletic, and he can wrap up, and he can
the
finish.
Downhill guy.
Yeah, and he's instinctive, and he's got energy and physicality, but he just needs to get a little bit bulkier, a little bit stronger without losing the speed, I think, to be an every down backer in the box. And he's got to improve some of his hand usage and some of the technique and that kind of stuff. He's a little, 50-50 on the run fits, and that's why you saw some big gash runs in the preseason, because he's he kind of sees it and goes, and there's some, he'll miss on a run fit. He'll get in the wrong hole at the wrong time. He doesn't recognize the blocking patterns sometimes around him as quickly as like a Flanagan Fowles will, or maybe even Winters. And then in man coverage, if you ask him to do a lot, there could be
it can run together on him.
Yeah, that can be a problem. But and then his time speed says that he's going to have a hard time in coverage carrying routes down the seams and down the field. But I actually don't see that at all. I see a guy who plays really fast and plays quite a bit faster than his instincts. I just thought, okay, you know what? I know there's some flaws in his game, but that was August. This is now December. This guy's been going to practice. He knows the defense. I think that if you were a bad team that was forced to put him out there, I think you'd look up and be like, wow, Jalen Graham had 12 tackles today. I mean, I think he's that kind of hyperactive, going to be involved in tons of plays. So
motor guy.
I want to see him. I'd like to see him, but it sounds like you're going to see Winters first for sure.